A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So let's start with today's analysis, which is going to be for 3rd of March 2023. So we finally get the verdict for three states of Tripura, Nagaland, and Meghalaya, and BJP and its allies. They win these two states of Tripura and Nagaland, whereas we have a hung verdict in case of Meghalaya. So hung verdict means that we do not have a clear majority, and panel of Prime Minister, Chief Justice of India, Leader of Opposition to pick the Chief Election Commissioner, says the court. So Constitution Bench of Supreme Court, it directed in a landmark judgment that the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners, they will be appointed by the President on the advice of a panel which would be consisting of the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha, or leader of the single largest party in opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. So here you need to also find out about the article of the Constitution which is related to it. And the court also said that fierce independence, neutrality, and honesty envisaged in the institution of election commission, it requires an end to government monopoly and exclusive control over the appointments to the highest poll body. So here the autonomy of election commission of India, it's in terms of its functioning is very important, and even in obviously in terms of the appointment, as has been said by the Supreme Court, becomes very important for its neutrality and its autonomy and independence. So again, talking about the issues related to governor and the chief ministers of different states, we are seeing that now Telangana government moves Supreme Court as the governor delays the note to the bills. So this is one form of tussle which is going on in Telangana. So the state says that several bills passed by the two houses of the state legislatures, they have been pending since September 14, 2022, and it takes the legal recourse for resolving its grievance against the governor's office. So apart from, knowing the important we can say powers about the governor, discretionary powers, and the articles which talks about the governor. So apart from that, you need to be knowing about the important judgments given by Supreme Court and different committees that have been formed in the past. And here we have Article 200. So government has quoted Article 200 of the Constitution, which mandates that the governor could assent or could withhold the assent, in which case the bill should be returned together with the message requesting that the houses reconsider the bill for any specified provision and would consider the desirability of introducing any such amendments as it might recommend in the message. And then we have Article 163 also. So, by virtue of this article, the governor was required to exercise his functions or any of them in his discretionary or in his discretion only on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the chief ministers. And the governor is not expected to act independently, and this position has been made amply clear by the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court in the Shamsher Singh versus State of Punjab 1974 judgment. So, Supreme Court basically upheld that a governor cannot be like acting independently, and that would be basically he or she would be working as per the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by a chief minister. So in this picture, you can see a huge chariot that is being ferried through the Ashtamudi Lake as part of the annual festival of the Thrikkudavur Sri Mahadevar temple, which is there in Kolam. So you can find out more about this Ashtamudi Lake, where it is like located, or if it is a like wetland or a Ramsar site or not. So that becomes important for us. So ornamental fish aquaculture to help the women in Lakshadweep Islands as a livelihood opportunity for them. So community-based ornamental fish aquaculture using the local resources is expected to help women in the Lakshadweep Islands to take the first step towards self-reliance through concerted activities. So they'll be getting support from the ICAR, National Bureau of Fish Genetic Resources. So you need to find out more about this. And it maintains a germplasm resource a center for the marine ornamental organisms on the Agati Island for the conservation as well as boosting the livelihood sources for the islanders. And certain green initiatives in the state of Andhra Pradesh, they attract the attention of Bill Gates, who is on a visit to India. And we yesterday, we also went through his ideas related to India. So ahead of the Global Investor Summit, which is going to be there in Visakhapatnam, which is right now, in state of like Andhra Pradesh, and its green projects are on the radar of Bill Gates. So Microsoft Corporation co-founder and co-chair of the Bill and the Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill Gates has taken special interest to learn about the green initiatives in Andhra Pradesh, especially the green energy pumped storage project that is being executed by the Greenco Group in Kurnool. Sugar Belt Shocker. So here we're talking about the state of Maharashtra. So the financial and sexual abuse of Maharashtra's migrant workforce. So these are the plights that the migrant workers they have to go through. And as the sugarcane harvest season comes to an end, residents of the villages that make the intrastate move for around 6 months, they talk about living on the fringes and the exploitation they face without even realizing the injustice. So when we talk about the data about the migrants, then talking about their safety, is there any law which talks about their rights, which is talking about the protection about their rights and their interests? So you need to find out more about that, and if we like have any body at the national level which is protecting the interest and rights of the migrants or not. So you need to find out more about the infrastructure, how the laws of which if we have related to the migrant workforce in India. So positing India's stand on the Ukraine war. So till now, our stand has been a very balanced one. We have like tried to maintain good relations, a good balance between Russia and the Western world. So when we talk about this, so we have been importing even the discounted crude oil from Russia, and the share has massively increased. It is like around 28% when we are talking about the share of crude oil that we are importing from Russia as of now. And on 23rd February 2023, on the eve of the first anniversary of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, United Nations General Assembly it adopted a resolution calling for an end to the war. And India has stayed away from voting on such resolutions. So the resolutions it was like favored by 141 members, opposed by 7, and 32 states were absent. So India was also absent. And India was among the 32 states, so it was absent. And this is in line with the position India has been taking on the Ukraine crisis from the beginning itself. And India has refused to condemn Russia for the invasion. So we haven't like condemned Russia for its actions. And it is also refused to join the West's sanctions. So India has not even participated in this sanctions exercise. So has stepped up the buying of Russian fuel at a discounted price, as I've already told you, and the 28% share that is increased, which was merely only, we can say, 1% before this war. And we have consistently abstained from UN votes on this war. So India's position that has triggered sharp responses in the West. And right now, obviously, we are like the pressure is building upon India to take a clear and one-sided position. But before the war, there was like much debate among the global strategic commentate about India's irreversible shift towards the West. And however, after the war began, many wondered why the world's largest democracy did not condemn Russia. And for some others, India was financing Vladimir Putin's war by buying the Russian oil. So few people also have this belief. And why did India take a different line from that of its partners in the West? And to understand India's position, one has to look at how India sees this war. So, obviously, when it comes to buying the crude oil from Russia, that too at such a higher amount. So, it is always said that India always keeps its national interest first, and that is the most important thing for us. So, in that context, we are like, since we are getting a discounted crude oil price, which is, we can say, a very good deal for us, so we are going ahead and buying it from Russia. So, New Delhi, which wants the world to get back to focusing on more pressing issues, should stick to its pragmatic neutrality and push for a practical solution to this crisis. So, we've been like also talking about that since India is presiding the G20 this year. So, we can even use this opportunity and basically using it to ensure that this war somehow even it gets like diluted or it comes to an end. And apart from that, few days back we also saw that US wants India to use its good relations that we have had with Russia, to use them in order to ensure that this war comes to an end. So that can be one of India's very important role in this entire war. So what New Delhi wants out of it? So what are basically New Delhi's or India's national interest over here? So ties with Russia, it is like we know that Russia is a historical partner and they are very important for India in many ways. So one is obviously energy, which is basically we have been talking about this thing and this has been very much highlighted is importing the discounted crude oil from Russia. Apart from that, and these energy ties, they're largely opportunistic. And even if the supplies from Russia they're disrupted, India could find alternatives for a higher price. And then talking about defense, so defense supplies, however, they're telling a different tale. So Russia has fulfilled over 46% of India's defense needs in the last 5 years. There's a sound argument that India should diversify its source of defense imports, but such a change would take time. And when we're talking about defense ties, so like few days back, we again saw that we're importing or we're expecting the delivery of S-400 uh, missile systems. These are the missile launchers from Russia. So that is one thing. And then thirdly, at a time when Russia is deepening its ties with China, which is India's main competitor. So India it should ask itself whether it should retain its leverage over Russia through existing ties or lose it completely by joining the Western coalition over the moral commitments. So this is, we can say, one of the concerns that the closeness of growing closeness between Russia and China, when obviously we are not right now having good relations with Russia, and we've been having standoffs at different points of time and at different places. And to manage its continental interest and tackle its continental security concerns, India has to work with powers in the Eurasian landmass where the US is practically absent, especially after its disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So, Russia plays a key role in India's continental foreign policy. Lastly, what is India's preferred outcome in the Ukraine war? So, neither the weakening of Russia nor the destruction and splintering of Ukraine is in India's interest. And what India wants is an immediate end to the war and a new security equilibrium between great powers, that is the Western world, so that the global economy could be stabilized and the world could focus on more pressing problems like climate change and UN reforms. So, if it wants peace and a resolution to this conflict, Jawaharlal Nehru stated in 1957 in the wake of the Soviet intervention in Hungary that it does not help calling names and condemning any power. Instead, India should stick to its pragmatic neutrality, which is rooted in realism, and continue to push for a practical solution to this Ukraine crisis. So, that's all what we can talk about India in the context of Russia Ukraine war. So, South Asia's human capital is the resilience it needs. And in an increasingly volatile world, a robust human development system in the region will ensure that lives and livelihoods they are protected. And obviously, whenever we are talking about human capital, so we always talk about the demographic dividend opportunity that India is having and how to leverage that, how to focus upon skilling the human resource, the human capital that we have, so that we can take the benefit out of the opportunity that we have in the context of demographic dividend. So the last few years they have ushered in a harsh new reality where crises are the norm rather than the exception. So we've been witnessing different pandemics, economic slumps, and extreme weather events where once tail end risks, but all three they have hit South Asia in rapid succession since 2020. And COVID-19 alone, it put millions of lives and livelihoods at risk, and its impacts, they have hardly undermined decades of developmental gains. So this is deeply distressing because the knowledge, skills, health that people accumulate, their human capital, that is a critical source of the resilience that countries rely on for recovery. So, to strengthen the resilience and protect the well being of the future generations, the governments across South Asia they need to take urgent policy action and invest in human capital. So, human capital as an underutilized asset. So, South Asia's people, they are its biggest asset, but they remain wastefully underutilized. So, here skilling them becomes very important. And as I were talking about demographic dividends, so you can find a mention of that also. And apart from that, interventions that can make a difference. So while the outlook it is grim, it is important to remember that well designed and implemented interventions they can make a difference if governments they are acting faster. So recent evidences suggest that even simple and low cost education programs they can lead to sizable gains in skills. And in Bangladesh, for example, attending a year of additional preschool through 2 hour sessions significantly improved the literacy, numeracy, and the social development scores over there. So these small interventions and small initiatives, they can make a huge difference. And meanwhile, in Tamil Nadu, also 6 months of extra remedial classes after the school, it helped the students catch up on about two-thirds of the lost learning linked to 18 months of school closures because of COVID-19. And then again in Nepal, government teachers, they ran a phone tutoring program that helped increase students' foundational numeracy by 30%. So, how, with the help of technology, also, we can intervene in a meaningful manner, can also be utilized in different states. Apart from that, using data and technology, so such systems they will help the countries better respond to the future shocks as well. Crises, obviously, they are unpredictable and they often present rapidly changing circumstances. So, a well functioning system is one that can spring into action the moment a shock strikes, ensure the essential services such as healthcare, learning remain uninterrupted, and have the flexibility to evolve as needs change, and such as the social protection systems that ramp up to meet the urgent needs. So the road ahead for South Asia it is definitely rocky, and the next crisis may be just around the corner. And a robust human development system would not only mitigate the damage but also help ensure livelihoods they are protected, and it could provide the resilience South Asia needs to prosper in an increasingly volatile world. Then, apart from that, Policymakers, they must buttress the domestic demand to drive growth. So whenever, like yesterday we were talking about that Indian economy is a consumption-led and consumption-driven economy, which constitutes about 55 to 60% of the share when it comes to GDP growth. So it is important even right now when we're talking about the resilience of the Indian economy, the domestic demand is a very important factor, which is very important for us in terms of our economic growth right now. So we need to ensure that we are able to meet the domestic demand. So the National Statistical Office latest release of the GDP data estimates a further deacceleration in the growth in October to December, that is third quarter of 2022, which was GDP was recorded at 4.4%. So a slowdown that the government's chief economic advisor has attributed largely to an upward revision in the year earliest period's figures. So chief economic advisor said that it is also because of the revision of the last three GDP figures also. And GDP, a product is basically GDP, it is posited to have expanded by 4.4%. And apart from that, we are seeing that manufacturing appears to have shrunk to minus 2.4%. So growth in 3 of the 5 services sectors, including the crucial trade, hotels, transport and communications, as well as the financial, real estate and professional services categories also it slowed sharply from the second quarter, which signals that the pent-up demand seen in the co-intensive sectors. So we are seeing that earlier the demand that we were seeing was majorly because of, again, the pent-up demand. And now we are seeing that obviously that is slowing down. So because of that, we are seeing its impact on the GDP figures also. So that the data revisions have essentially made it that much harder to draw meaningful conclusions or spotlights the challenges to crafting the policy solutions. As top central bank officials, they have frequently pointed out at this thing. So you can see BJP has won even in northeastern states. So people, they are celebrating Holi at Parsana and Nandgaon. So we saw that the unemployment rate has again increased. So that is a concern when it comes to the problem of jobless growth in India. So here this article is talking about the aftermath of Sri Lanka's economic crash. So as the island nation, it eagerly awaits a provisional IMF package to chart its path to economic stability. It is currently witnessing a new wave of protest, mainly by the workers and the professionals. These people's economic hardships, they are increasing. So obviously these protests and unrest, they are also increasing, and the government also faces criticism over the recent postponement of the local body elections. So whenever we talk about the economic situation and the political situation, both of them are not right now in good terms in the Sri Lanka. So in July 2022, the former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected as the president, and that was through an urgent parliamentary vote. So one of the first tasks he set for himself was to negotiate an IMF deal to resurrect the country's battered economy. And obviously, one of the reasons why Sri Lankan economy is in such a state is firstly because of COVID-19 pandemic. The like tourism sector was impacted, and apart from that, the China's debt that we talk about China's debt policy. So even that is also responsible for the economic situation of Sri Lanka in today's times. And IMF has placed a lot of emphasis on fixing Sri Lanka's corruption vulnerabilities, which has been a rallying point for many Sri Lankan economists and the policy analysts. And it is corruption that led Sri Lanka to this precipice in the first place. And that's what they believe, that it is also because of the corruption practices. And according to them, corruption coupled with the state's tendency to implement the populist welfare programs that are unsustainable that made the country's economy fragile over time. So, obviously, this approach of the political parties is another reason why it is another reason for the current economic situation of Sri Lanka. And over the last year, poor families they have been forced to reduce their food intake drastically. Soaring prices have kept the fish, egg, and meat out of the reach for many, raising concern among the medical practitioners over the nutrition levels in the community. So obviously inflation is very high. They've like less amount when it comes to food security. So even that is a question mark. And political situation is not stable, economic situation is not stable. So they are like kind of waiting for a bailout from IMF right now. So divisions between the West and on the other hand, Russia, China, it derails a joint statement at G20 meeting. So US Secretary of State and the Russian Foreign Minister, they exchanged sharp words despite Prime Minister Modi's appeal to rise above the differences. And India issues chair's summary naming Russia and China for not joining the consensus on Ukraine from the Bali document. So again, we are seeing the impact of Russia-Ukraine war over here. So explaining the decision to shun the language on Ukraine that he had accepted last year. So here we're talking about the Bali Declaration. The Bali Declaration took place half a year ago, and a lot of events took place since then. So, as the Indian negotiators failing to convince their Russian and the Chinese counterparts to sign on to the language of the last year's joint communique in the Bali is a setback, and New Delhi will have to do some heavy diplomatic lifting in the next few months in order to have a joint communique at the G20 Leaders Summit in September. India and Italy, they elevate their ties, they sign MOU on the defense cooperation. So ending the chill in the bilateral relationship in past few years, in what of the foreign secretary he described as a legacy issue is it is now behind. And India and Italy, they announced the elevation of the bilateral relationship to the level of strategic partnership while also concluding a memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation. So basically, the two countries have established a startup bridge between India and Italy. And another important area of the mutual cooperation is going to be now defense. So that is there. And two countries, they also concluded a declaration of intent on the migration and mobility also. And will be enhancing our cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Then this was basically at the 8th Raisina Dialogue, which was organized by Observer Research Foundation jointly with the Ministry of External Affairs. So this is important for prelims. India and China, they discussed the LAC situation on Jaishankar's meeting the counterpart kin. So they have discussed the abnormal current state of relations with China and the situation along the line of actual control. Apart from that, the meeting was the first between the two ministers, and it was focused on addressing the challenges in the bilateral relationship and specifically the peace and tranquility on the border. So, election commissioner having a tenure below 6 years is a breach of law as per the Supreme Court. And the court's observations they came while discussing the designation of Arun Goel as an election commissioner, and he has a term of little over 5 years. So the philosophy behind giving a reasonably long stint to the appointee to the post of election commissioner or the chief election commissioner is that it would enable the officer to have enough time to be able to assert his independence. So this is one thing. So these are regarding the elections. So Supreme Court forms expert panel to probe any regulatory failure on the Adani issue. So an expert panel has been formed. So it is appropriate to constitute an expert committee for assessment of the extant regulatory framework and for making recommendations to strengthen it. And the court has asked the committee to inquire into the causal factors of any such failures, and the bench directs SEBI to expand its existing investigation into the Hindenburg's report allegations against the Adani Group, and the panel is going to submit the report within 2 months. So obviously, independence and transparency in investigation is very important in this whole issue because it would be impacting everybody's interest. So, a land mafia damages ancient fortified city of Sisupalgarh. So, land sharks armed with heavy earth-moving equipment, they have damaged a portion of the wall. The fortified ancient city of Sisupalgarh, which is an archaeological heritage that has survived over 2,600 years on the outskirts of Bhubaneswar. And what has made the matter worse is that destruction occurred just as the Archaeological Survey of India and the Odisha's Revenue Administration they were working in tandem to acquire the land and safeguard this heritage site. So, case has been registered at the local police regarding this. So, India and Australia they signed an agreement on education, and two foreign universities coming from Australia are going to set up their campuses in India. So, this is a good development, a great development. So our donors, they include 30 organizations, including the Indian government coming from CPR. So which is the Center for Policy Research. So, days after the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act registration of the Center for Policy Research, they were suspended. The think tank officials they said that its donors includes over 30 organizations which are based in India and abroad. Among them, Government of India is also one of the donors to them. So here, what is important for us is to find out more about the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, the provisions, and apart from that, knowing more about the Open Society Foundations. What are they? So the situation in Punjab is really volatile, and the Punjab Chief Minister meets the Union Home Minister and he discusses the security and the Ajnala case was recently witnessed in the state of Punjab. So Japan's happy science cult leader, he dies, and so basically he claimed to be able to communicate with the spirits, died at 66 age. So SpaceX launches US, Russia, UAE astronauts to space station. You can have a look at the picture also. And 23% in Germany, they are immigrants and children of immigrants as of 2021. So Is the first time the statistics office has analyzed the country's population based on the migration figure. So yesterday we saw that Moody's were, as per the Moody's estimate, they said that we will be having less than 7% of GDP growth this year, but chief economic advisor said that it might beat even 7% this financial year. So high frequency indicators, the pace of recovery suggest greater likelihood of upward revision of the GDP numbers, and he contends the rising interest rates simply that reflects the fact that there is healthy underlying demand for credit also. So even the credit sector is performing nicely, and obviously we are having a strong macroeconomic fundamentals. Then even analyzing the whole economic situation, looking at the high frequency indicators, even that is positing a positive picture. He says that real interest rate is not very high at the moment, and this is there is pent up demand in some sectors right now. So that is the case. And so about rural inflation remaining high, he said that it did not take into account the fact that bulk of the population may be getting food grains at zero cost. So this is one thing regarding the rural inflation. And electric vehicle adoption is rising in rural India, and national highways, they have better charging infrastructure right now, but obviously still more needs to be done. So having a look at the mint, so the topic is how YouTube is used to pump and dump the stocks. So we are seeing an increase in how social media is basically influencing the stock market decisions of different traders and investors. So fraudsters, they are making a quick buck. They are exploiting the gullibility of the people looking for financial advice free of cost on social media. So basically, how do they work is that you create a YouTube channel and you spend money on Google AdSense to grow your channel, and then you start making false claims about a stock and try to influence the people's decision. And after that, you dump the stock, because when more and more people would be trading or would be investing or buying the shares, the prices would increase, and then ultimately the person who is giving so-called financial advice would be selling the stock, and that's how he would be able to make a profit. So what you need to keep in mind, basically, when even if you are like following any YouTube channel regarding financial advisors, so you need to be wary of the channels that recommend the high risk products. So high risk products includes advices regarding investments in cryptocurrencies and futures and options. Then you don't rely on the on the influencers for the financial advice. You need to fact check claims which are being made on YouTube or Instagram channels or WhatsApp, and go to SEBI registered investment advisors for the financial advice, and do not like completely rely upon such financial advisors through the social media platforms. So, Prime Minister says that from the very beginning of the Ukraine conflict, India has made it clear that this dispute can only be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy. India is fully prepared to contribute to any peace process. So, our stand is very clear when it comes to this war. Coming to Financial Express. So, here you can have a look at the economy of Andhra Pradesh, and so So it has been ranked number one in ease of doing business consecutively for 3 years. There is conducive business environment. Basically, what all do you need for a conducive business environment is the thing that definitely should come to your mind. Then it has been registering double-digit growth. Awards and accolades has been provided to it in terms of logistical sector, then in energy sector, in port and infrastructure development. There is robust maritime infrastructure, and there is abundant resources from minerals to water, uninterrupted power supply, skilled workforce, airports and seaports. So RIL, that is Reliance Industries, is going to roll out the cheapest genome sequencing kits, which will be priced at $150. So the test kit is the price is nearly 70% lower than in Western countries, and according to the firm, no other Indian company has such a product. So a strand acquired by an RL arm in 2021 to conduct the genetic test based on sequencing of 20,000 genes and tests to diagnose the inherited risk of cancer, heart conditions, metabolic disorders, carrier status for various rare diseases. So, what are rare diseases is the task for you guys today, and that's how Reliance is entering this segment as well. So, funding slowdown takes startups to alternative finance platforms. So, alternative investment platforms like we have Grip Invest, Tyke, and Record Club, they are getting increased interest by these startups, and they offer a variety of financing options such as revenue based financing, corporate debt, fixed income, and other equity linked funding instruments. And they have been also going to the non-banking financial companies to raise their capital. So these platforms, they're offering a wide variety of financing options to these startups. So millets mean nutrition, and our agriculture minister says that we are eating well but not nutrition rich food. And there's a problem of malnutrition not only in India but in many parts of the world. And we can address the malnutrition problem by growing more millets. So we've been celebrating this year as the International Year of Millet. So we are focusing a lot upon it. So you need to be knowing about the climatic conditions and how they are useful for us. In which all states do you find the maximum amount of cultivation of millets? So all this becomes very important, and also like related to science, what are their nutritional capacities which makes them distinct from the cereal food grains that we are currently relying upon. So private consumption seem to be remain muted as of now. Inflation, economic uncertainty, fall in the jobs and wages are the key concerns. So inflation, economic uncertainty, talking about the global economy, and fall in the jobs, as we saw that unemployment rate has increased, and wages also, that is a key concern for us. So because of that, we are seeing that private consumption, it is not so strong as of now. So Prime Minister's Gati Shakti is boosting competitiveness, and it is a national master plan and logistics policy. Together, it will be like helping in improving the competitiveness of the businesses and attract more investment into India. It would be helping in bringing down the logistics cost tremendously. It would be also helping in building seamless connectivity networks and creating a positive impact on the logistics ecosystem. Currently, there are about 1,300 layers of data consisting of forest, wildlife sanctuaries, rivers, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, among others, and added that the Gati Shakti would not only like address the critical gaps in infrastructure, but also help in planning the social infrastructure such as schools, nursing homes, and hospitals. So rice exports, they still keep the pace despite the tax that is being imposed on them. So strong global demand, competitive pricing, boosting the shipments. So, with robust global demand and floods adversely impacting crops in Pakistan, India's rice exports in the current fiscal they are likely to match last year's record level of 21 million ton, despite the government imposing export taxes on certain varieties of rice. So, Prime Minister says there's a need for global unity. So, the experience of the last few years, financial crisis, climate change, pandemic, terrorism, and wars, it clearly shows that global governance has failed. We should not allow issues that we cannot resolve together to come in the way of those we can resolve together. So, talking about the Competition Commission of India, let the CCI do its job. So, making a judicial member mandatory for the Competition Commission of India does not make sense for the majority of the Commission's work. So, this is a recent development, and although CCI is endowed with punitive powers like other regulators, such as we have SEBI, RIDI, CRC, and even RBI, but that does not make it a quasi judicial body. So certain quarters, mainly from the legal fraternity, they have been raising the issue that Competition Commission of India, given the nature of its functions and the processes, it must mandatorily include a judicial member. And they assert that CCI is a quasi judicial body with powers to impose heavy penalties to which it cannot do justice without the benefit of a judicial mind sitting on the panel. So that's what most of the experts had to believe. And this view has been buttressed by a judgment of the division bench of the Delhi High Court, and which directed that the CCI must ensure the presence of a judicial member while passing final orders which are adjudicatory. So CCI's remit encompasses three distinct areas under the Competition Act, which is competition advocacy explicitly mandated under Section 18 of the Competition Act, then the merger control, then we have the antitrust cases comprising the violations through the anti-competitive agreement or the abuse of dominance. So recently we also saw the Google's case, how it was fined because of misuse of its dominant power in the market. So there is no compelling reason to mandate that the CCI must mandatorily have a judicial member. That's what the authors have to believe. And on the other hand, as an important market regulator, it needs a diversified composition from the various fields and members with well-honed analytical abilities and are experienced insight into the markets and the competitive forces. So that is much more important rather than having a judicial member in the bench. So, talking about judicial overreach and Supreme Court's directions in the Adani case undermine the position of the markets regulator, that is SEBI in this case. So, this step by the judiciary is being felt by many as a case of judicial overreach. So the Supreme Court, it has decided to form an expert committee to review the regulatory mechanisms and protect investor interest in the light of the report by the US-based short seller, that is Hindenburg Research, against the Adani Group. And the court has also directed the Securities and Exchange Board of India to investigate the allegations in the report and file a status report within 2 months. So most of the members of the expert panel, they are well chosen as they are highly credible names with an impeccable track record. And the problem is elsewhere. So one fails to understand the logic of judicial intervention in this matter. And many would interpret the Supreme Court's action as a vote of no confidence in the country's market regulator. And the argument that the constitution of the expert committee does not reflect on SEBI's functioning does not sound convincing enough. So much of what the apex court has asked the SEBI to do is something the market regulator has been doing or should do in the normal course any which ways. And It is basically directed SEBI to investigate this whole issue relating to the Adani group. But that's what the job of a market regulator or SEBI is, and this is what it has been doing. So this thing is being felt like judicial overreach. And so it's obvious that SEBI's response has not satisfied the judges, and this is like not to suggest that SEBI hasn't faltered. The approach of the regulator has been slow in many cases, and the core issue is how the share prices of the group rose to such extraordinary levels without any investigation or regulatory intervention. So that is again one of the main questions. Instead of focusing or criticizing judges or the judiciary for judicial overreach, the the main issue is not this. So Adani Total Gas stock, for example, their share prices went up by 3,900% in just 2.5 years. So this is very stark and very shocking that how could it be possible that like without any investigation or regulatory intervention, the stock prices can increase by such a massive amount. So, if that's the reason for the Supreme Court decision, it should have spelled it out clearly. And investors, they have a right to know whether the Supreme Court thinks SEBI has not been doing its job properly or not. So, after all, if the Supreme Court has the mandate of keeping the interest of the ordinary investors as paramount, nothing should have been done to undermine the position of the regulator, which is supposed to be the protector of the investors' interests. So we've been talking about the potential in case of innovations that India has and how Bill Gates has been emphasizing on again this thing. So lastly, coming to the Indian Express, let's see what important do we have here. We've already looked into all this. So conflict wood, basically, this is Burma teak stocks, which are lying there in Nagpur. So conflict wood basically under sanctions, priced Myanmar teak find its way to US and European Union markets via India. So firms, they say that they're following the legal process, but tax records and Northeast Caesars, they show the cases otherwise, and they've been basically seized, and they were basically, then if like they're not following the norms and they have been seized, so it means that they are not following the norms and that they are in a way being smuggled. So that is one of the possibilities. Coming to the editorial page, so the ballot is stronger than the bullet. This was said by Abraham Lincoln, and this is in the context of BJP and its allies winning in the northeastern states. So the assembly election verdicts underscore the stringings in the region and the success of BJP and the regional outfits in tapping into all those opportunities that were visible to them. So here it is again talking about the independence of the Election Commission of India, and obviously in terms of its functioning and the appointments. So that is very important for ensuring that we are having free and fair elections. So Myanmar and teak trade highly priced and dodgy. So sourcing from Myanmar leaked records which have been reviewed by ICIJ and its media partners show that there were at least 21 cases of teak being bought from Myanmar while companies were holding green certificates. Then 8 companies with valid certificates purchased the teak from Myanmar. Then we have 9 countries who bought teak from Myanmar after 2021, which includes India, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Turkey, and USA. So why is teak imported from Myanmar, which is described as a conflict word? So since Feb 2021 coup in Myanmar, when the democratically elected government was overthrown, the military junta, it has also taken control of the Myanmar Timber Enterprises. So this is a state-owned company which has exclusive rights over the country's precious timber and teak trade. So the MTE, it has held an estimated dozen timber auctions since the coup, and sales of this conflict wood pro-democracy supporters allege they are a key revenue stream for this military regime. So what is so special about the Myanmar teak? So teak from Myanmar's deciduous and evergreen forest is considered the most tensile and durable hardwood. It is resistant to water and termites. So that's why it becomes very important. And this prized wood, it is definitely in demand for its high-end furniture, veneer, and ship decking. So that's how it becomes important. And Global Forest Watch says that the country, over the last 2 decades, it has lost forest cover roughly the size of Switzerland. So that is there. So what steps have been taken to check this illegal harvesting of timber and teak from Myanmar? So the European Union introduced the European Union Timber Regulation, which puts the onus on timber merchants to do sufficient due diligence to disallow illegal timber from entering their markets. So different steps have been taken. So what has been the impact of these sanctions? So despite this, basically the flow of teak originating from Myanmar continues into the US and several European Union countries as borne out by the global trade data. So still the trade it is still happening, but obviously you can't go and just keep cutting the trees and just losing the forest in an unsustainable manner. And so, talking about what are the loopholes to be plugged to ensure that India is not looked upon as a leakage country. So, on the question of continuing exports, which are evident from the trade data from Myanmar to countries where sanctions are in place, the timber traders they said that their buyers were free to do DNA testing on the hardwood for like traceability of the origins of the tree. However, this science is a nascent one, even in the developed world, and it has not been introduced in India either by the timber traders or by the police forces, for instance, as evidence against the smugglers who are frequently caught along the Indo-Myanmar border with a stolen truck consignment. So, in a way, basically, this is being smuggled. And what has been the reaction of the international statutory bodies like the Forestry Stewardship Council on this continuing supply of teak from Myanmar to sanctioned countries? So you need to find out more about this council. It became important, so it is aware of the certificate holders involvement in the certified and the non-certified tea products. Some certified tea products origin it remains to be scrutinized, and ineligible products sold as the FSC certified with the FSC claims on their sales documents intentionally they are considered deliberate false claims that constitute fraud. So it takes strict measures against those who commit a fraud. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in Sarkari, and you'll be getting the PDF link in the description box. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.